10th of May 2023. In this Skidmark I want to talk about Odessa. And before I can start with the thing, I think it is important that we just get the background ready. Odessa in 2014, after that Maidan revolution, let's call it a revolution, but we know it was a coup orchestrated by Victoria Nuland and her crew. They installed a new government in Kiev, Poroshenko, and the people in the east of the Ukraine and the south, where the vast majority are Russian-speaking people, were not very happy. That was when the referendums was held in Crimea, which led to Russia taking Crimea. At the same time, the people in Odessa started protesting, and the Victoria Nuland gang sent people to Odessa. Now it was peaceful protest, but the guys were unhappy, and the Azov Zazis pitched up in Odessa and started infiltrating the protest marches and creating violence, as we are so well aware of how the Americans work. We know them, we know how they do these things. So they stirred up a lot of violence. Take a look at this image, this specific image. Look at that image and look at that insignia. So a lot of people, when the violence broke out and there were snipers on the roofs of buildings that were shooting at the people in the crowds, and panic broke out, and a lot of people fled into the trade union house in Odessa. And that is where these, let's call it, enforcers really showed their true colors, and they set the building alight with all the people in there. Now all the people, of course they panicked with the building being on fire, and I think 45 people burned to death in the building, and a lot of people, look at this image, a lot of people jumped out of the windows. And these people that jumped out of the windows were shot when they hit the pavings. So it was a brutal thing. Now, before I continue, I'm going to show you a little slideshow of what happened there. Now for us, sitting far away, we cannot imagine the violence. But the main thing was, the Americans were 100% committed not to allow Odessa to do what Crimea did. And the levels of violence was unbelievable. Listen to this tweet. 9 years ago, on May 2nd, I couldn't sleep. Before my eyes was the horror of Odessa burning, people alive against the backdrop of a laughing and looting crowd, right on the air of the democratic talk shows of post-Maidan Ukraine. Those people are absolutely brutal. And then there's this. Today marks 9 years since the tragic events in Odessa. At that time, 48 people died in the House of Trade Unions. Another 250 were injured. And then there is this background. May 2nd marks 9 years since the tragic events in Odessa, which culminated in the bone-chilling massacre in the House of Trade Unions. On that day, Ukrainian radical nationalists intentionally set fire to the building where an opposition group against the new authorities has taken refuge. As a result, 48 people were burned alive, poisoned by carbon monoxide, and died after falling from the windows of upper floors. The world watched the development practically in real time, with terrible footage of charred corpses circulating online. In fact, the Kiev regime repeated what Bandera death squads did to Katyn in Belarus 80 years ago. It is outrageous that the incident was never fully investigated. For appearance sake, the Kiev authorities found a scapegoat, former public security police chief Dmitry Fuchechin. No other perpetrators of the crime have been punished. Maria Zakharova, on April 27, 2023. Many of those who were caught on camera and could be identified as taking part in killing people not only remained free, but went on to become public figures in Ukraine, where the state positions itself as a flagship of democracy in the region. Only people of that kind could climb up the social ladder in the atmosphere of lawlessness, police brutality, authoritarianism, and gross human rights violations. We will never forget the tragedy in Odessa. We will insist that everyone involved in the brutal crime to be identified and held responsible. That is some background to give you an idea of what happened there. And then I've got this from Eva Bartlett. May the 2nd marks 9 years since the tragic events in Odessa. It's now clear that many of the anti-junta activists who occupied the trade union's house were neither burned to death nor died of smoke inhalation, but were savagely shot at point-blank range by agents and thugs who had infiltrated the building to kill as many of the occupants as possible, burn the corpses and then slip away without notice. Some of the victims, like a young woman who was 8 months pregnant, were strangled with the electrical cord and left slumped backwards over her desk in a room that shows no sign of fire or smoke damage. In another case, a woman was stripped naked from the waist down, raped, killed and set ablaze. Guys, that is brutal, but that is Zazi conduct. And then we have this. 9 years ago, for many of us, together with the people burned alive in Odessa, House of Trade Unions, Ukraine, which we knew ceased to exist forever. A huge number of militias went to the Donbass precisely after the burning of Odessa residents in the House of Trade Unions by Ukraine nationalists. Heavenly kingdom to them. The fact of the matter is, what happened in Odessa was orchestrated by Victoria Newland and her gang. And then we come to today, to current times. Kiev regime deployed up to 4,000 servicemen to the Odessa region to prepare a provocation against Transnistria. From May 9 to May 15, a group of armed forces of Ukraine plans to advance to the direction of Tiraspol in order to start an armed provocation and divert the Russian troops, and another one will try to seize ammunition depots in the village of Kolbasna. Now if you look at that map, you can see that little yellow slobber of land there next to Moldova. That is Transnistria. Now you did have a look at that slideshow that I showed you. Here is just a post about it. House of Trade Unions. Haven't forgotten nor forgiven. Russia remembers. And then there is this. The strike of the Iran drones on the military academy in Odessa claimed the lives of 50 soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine and foreign advisors. On the night of May 4, Russian armed forces launched a group attack by the Iran unmanned aerial vehicles on the Academy of Ground Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in Odessa. As a result of the strike, more than 50 Ukrainian servicemen were killed, as well as a foreign advisor who trained commanders for the armed forces of Ukraine. Up to 300 more servicemen were injured of varying severity. According to local sources, after the strike, an entire floor of the city hospital was blocked to help wounded foreign advisors, and Ukrainian security service officers took a non-disclosure agreement from doctors. And here is more on that. This is images of the warehouses that was blown apart by the drones. 2 explosions thundered in Odessa at night. Once again, Ukrainian air defense did not work. As a result, by the morning it became known that the attack of the Russian missiles fell on the logistics infrastructure. Most likely weapons and shells necessary for the Ukrainian offensive were stored there. And then we have this. Nazis are preparing a bloodshed in Odessa. That there's a load of tanks and other military vehicles there. There is no Russian military there, but they will put Russian Z's and V's and O's on them and will wear Russian uniforms with white stripes and massacre citizens to film as if it was Russia doing it, and then spread across the internet to the west to see. And then we have this building. It's another shot, another warehouse in Odessa that was bombed. And then we have this. At night, the Russian armed forces launched a missile attack on the territory of the former recreation center in Belgorod district of the Odessa region. Now, I have handled all these things and I discussed it and showed it to you just to give you a background of what's happening. With the Russians withdrawing from Kherson city and the subsequent blowing up of that bridge, the Antonovsky Bridge, it was going to be very difficult for Russian forces to reach Odessa. Now, why do I talk about Odessa? After what I've now told you, it is my personal opinion that it will be political suicide for Putin if he does not take Odessa. The Russian population will not forgive him. They will not forgive him. But the blowing up of the Antonovsky Bridge has created a problem now. But you must understand, the majority of the people, vast majority of the citizens of Odessa is Russians. And they are pro-Russian. I have seen other images where the citizens of Odessa painted that orange and black stripes on a hell of a lot of buildings on the 9th of May. Totally against the law and I don't know what else, but it just happened. So the reality is that if there's a referendum tomorrow in Odessa, it will most probably be an overwhelming vote to join Russia. Now, Odessa has been part of Russia for ages, and then it was given to Ukraine, and there was a lot of unhappiness about that, and there's a lot of stories. Fact is, Odessa is historically Russia. But now, what is happening there, and what that article said of the guys that are preparing for a bullshit story. And you have seen with that trade union house, the authorities has got no problem in killing the citizens in Odessa. Now, the drone attacks that has happened over the past 2 days, it is my opinion that what is happening there is Russia is remotely disabling as much as possible of the Ukrainian forces in Odessa. They've also blown the rail bridge that is a line that is bringing in hardware from Romania into Odessa. And that's also the railway line with which a lot of NATO equipment was brought into Ukraine. And if you look at the images that I've showed you, it is warehouses and facilities where the military is together. And from the other information pieces that I have seen, the Russians have destroyed a hell of a lot of equipment that was in warehouses in Odessa. And a lot of Ukrainian soldiers were killed. So I am of the opinion that the Russians are remotely busy working on the Ukrainian forces in Odessa to get them to a level where the people can revolt on their own and that they are not faced with an overwhelming force of Ukrainian soldiers. That is just my opinion. How much of it is possible, I don't know. But the fact remains, there's no way that Putin can leave Odessa. It's just not going to work. And there is other analysts that I have listened to, and they say that with the Antonovsky Bridge down, the only other option left for the Russians is to attack Odessa from the sea and bring their forces in from the sea. So my feeling is that the Russians are now surgically removing as much as possible Ukrainian military resistance in Odessa. How it's going to happen, I have no idea. But I'm going to say it again. There's no way that Russia cannot take Odessa, because the Russian population will not forgive them. The Russian population in Russia. And we saw a month and a half ago, where the Ukrainians demolished that massive monument of Catherine, things like that. But the reality is that the brutality against the civilians in Odessa is still going on. I hope you find this interesting. Please give me a like and subscribe. But it's important that you share. These channels are blocking my stuff. The sharing is really important. Thank you.